You are listening to MCC Votes and Seats, the podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Mathias Corvinus Collegium. We provide election insights with experts and politicians.
In this episode, we are analyzing the background of and the lessons learned from the presidential election that was held in Slovakia in March and April 2024. We feel privileged to host once again Dr. Jaroslav Ušiak, Professor and Vice Dean for International and Public Relations at the Matej Bel University. Dear Jaroslav, we truly appreciate that you accepted our invitation.
Thank you very much for invitation, and I'm really happy that I could be here today with you again and share my opinion and view on Slovak presidential elections.
So let's get started. In the first round, Ivan Korčok led with more than 20% of the votes, 22.5%, while Peter Pellegrini gained 37%. However, in the second round, Pellegrini defeated Korčok with 53.1% of the vote. What factors might explain the growing popularity of the so-called social populist candidate?
The growing popularity of Peter Pellegrini over Ivan Korčok between the first and second rounds of the presidential elections can be explained by several factors. Firstly, me personally, I was quite surprised this mobilization of voters by Peter Pellegrini. I was slightly expecting a little bit different result, but generally in Slovakia till today win the election who was after the first round in the second place. We continue in this trend in Slovakia again. Peter Pellegrini, who was the second, also won the presidential election in the second round. The significant component of Pellegrini's success was his ability to effectively mobilize voters. Reflect the high voter turnout with participation in the second round exceeded 61%, is the highest since 1999. This mobilization was partially achieved through focusing on a key topic which resonated with voters, including the security concerns and fears of military conflict. By presenting himself as a candidate who would ensure Slovakia does not become an active part of a military conflict, and he appealed to a broader spectrum of voters. This topic contrasted with the negative branding of Korčok as a war candidate, which could deter some voters from supporting him. We need to notice that the president does not have the right to send the troops abroad. It's just the government responsibility. In addition, Pellegrini's victory was supported by the strategic backing from voters of Stefan Harabin and other political forces. If even this support was not presented by these voters directly, but indirectly. Also indirectly was Peter Pellegrini supported by the out of the parliament party Republika, for example. But the decision by voters of, for example, Stefan Harabin, who voted in the first round, likely support Pellegrini in the second, could be motivated more by opposition to Ivan Korčok than direct support for Pellegrini. The next factor should be also from support of Robert Fico, Andrej Danko, and anti-system political parties and candidates, which could have played a significant role in strengthening Pellegrini's position. We can see the differences. The Pellegrini emphasis on national identity and sovereignty, which could play a role in his growing popularity among voters who feel that globalization and international commitments threaten national independence. This approach allows him to appeal to voters with nationalism and sovereignist view, which maybe particularly resonated in the current political climate. Also, there was one more point. Igor Matovic tried to support Ivan Korčok, but Matovic's explicit support for Korčok and the anti-campaign against Pellegrini did not have the expected impact, possibly due to limited trust in Matovic by voters. This factor highlights the importance of political image and trust. Of course, the regional and demographic factors also play a significant role, especially when we are looking at the support from Christian Foro, the chair of the Alliance, represented the Hungarian minority in Slovakia, and the party support Peter Pellegrini. So we can see also at the map that the Pellegrini strong support in the southern district of Slovakia and among voters with the Hungarian nationality. We can see that in Pellegrini's case, his growing popularity in the Hungarian community could be explained by promises or political position which was resonated and need. For example, a day before the moratorium in Slovakia was the government session in Galanta, and the next days during the moratorium in Slovakia was streaming by Hungarian television the interview with Peter Pellegrini. So he has this advantage when we compare it with Ivan Korčok. Finally, we can see that Pellegrini was successful in mobilization within the polarization and negative campaign, which also played a crucial role. Pellegrini victory does represent a significant moment for Slovak politics, reflecting not only his personal popularity, but also the complex social and political dynamics, especially with the polarization of the society with the conflict on Ukraine.
You briefly mentioned that Mathias supported Korčok in the second round.
Yes.
What did the endorsements tell us about Slovakian party politics in general? So in the second round, the leftist Pellegrini's candidacy was supported by both ultranationalist Andrej Danko from SNS and Christian Foro from the Hungarian Alliance, as well as Smer-leaning former diplomat Jan Kubiš and NATO EU skeptic Milan Náchlik, while centrist Korčok was endorsed by the anti-establishment Matovič, as we already said, and the right-wing liberal Patrik Dubovský. So can we assume a quasi bipolarizing party system in Slovakia when it comes to political ideologies and geopolitical considerations, such as sovereigntist bloc against the pro-West bloc?
Firstly, I start with the short explanation because you correctly mentioned the support of unsuccessful candidate. Ivan Korčok tried to presenting himself as a candidate with a strong pro-Western and pro-European direction, who would maintain Slovakia on its traditional foreign policy course if elected. Peter Pellegrini was better with utilization of his popularity and recognizability. He was better known, the image of the stable politician who can bring peace to Slovakia. At the beginning, he tried to be very positive. Later, he was changing his campaign to more negative consequences of electing his opponent. It was for the second round. But when we are looking, the Stefan Harabini tried to create the polarization of voter with support of activities which was more pro-Slovakian, against the NATO, against the EU. Igor Matovič, for example, despite not participation in the actual fight for the presidency, he also amended that he don't want to be the president. He was just there to support Ivan Korčok. And later he tried to, during the campaign, stated that he can surprise the voters to mobilize voters to vote for Korčok because he will publish something against Peter Pellegrini. Support for Ivan Korčok perceived as centrist from, let's say, personalities like anti-system Igor Matovič, right-wing liberal Patrik Dubovský, and evidence in a similar trends, alliances are formed based on the current political needs or personal sympathies, not always on the basis of clear definite ideological boundaries. Let's say the result, the division of between the right and left is blurred, and when where voters and political parties are willing to cross ideological barriers in the name of achieving short-term goal. But as we can see, this phenomenon is not isolated to the Slovakia, but indicates a broader trend in the modern politics where traditional ideological categories are increasingly less capable of fully capturing the dynamics of political alliances and the voter preferences. In this context, of the presidential election, this point that the fact that voters and political parties are prepared to compromise on their ideological points if it means achieving specific political advantages or preventing the victory of an opponent with whom they ideologically diverge even more. I can see the assumption of this bipolarization of the Slovak party system based on political ideologies and geopolitical perspective, or division into the sovereignist versus pro-Western blocs, simplify, from my point of view, the complex of political and social reality in Slovakia. In the context of the geopolitical perspective, there is an evident tension in Slovakia between the forces that favor closer ties with the European Union and NATO, let's say the pro-Western blocs, and those that emphasize sovereignty and independence in the foreign relations, or seek alternatives in cooperation with the other powers such as Russia, let's say the sovereignist bloc. This tension is an important part of the political discourse, of course, and influence the party and government policies. But despite the existence of pro-Western and sovereignist orientation, the Slovak political scene is also enriched by a broader spectrum of opinions and attitudes, which not always be classified into the one or two sides. This diversity of political parties and movements striving to appeal to voters based on various topics, like Christian values, which is the Christian democratic movement, the Hungarian minority, represented by the Alliance party, social and economic policies to minority rights, highlights the multidimensionality of the Slovak politics. And this quasi-bipolarization can be one of the framework for analysis, but for a more complete understanding, it is necessary also considering other factors and variables present on the Slovak political and social scene. And especially when we are talking that the presidential election is the fighting of the two candidates, the Slovak political party system is much more diverse.
So let's not oversimplify then the assessment of Slovakian party politics and ideology policies. Peter Pellegrini promised he would not be an uncritical supporter of the Fico government, even if he was one of the main pillars in the fourth Fico cabinet prior to his election as president of the republic. How can the leftist head of state, the new leftist head of state, be a balancing element with the structures of power? And is he able to symbolize or internalize national unity in Slovakia?
It is quite a hard question right now. Of course, as you mentioned, he said that he would not be an uncritical follower of Robert Fico's government. But after the election, he said that there will be not an enemy in the presidential palace. So it means that they will be cooperative in the main aspects. The presidential palace will maybe not become an opportunistic power center, harming the government. But there could be the question of arising concerns about insufficient independence or the critical stance towards the government policy. I would like to mention there was the article of the former politician and diplomat Peter Weiss, and he expressed concerns that the aggressiveness and the rudeness in politics, which is characterized by Robert Fico's government, could increase even in future. Weiss pointed to possible more radical government steps, such as changes in the management of the Slovak television or measures against NGOs, which could lead to a future tension and conflict in society. So when we are looking on the presidential election results that show us a deep divided in the Slovak society, and when we are looking even on this result, we can see that the differences between Peter Pellegrini and Ivan Korčok was the narrowest in the modern Slovak history. This indicates that the new president will face the challenge of uniting a divided Slovakia. There is a question if Pellegrini's ability to embody national unity will depend on his ability to assert himself as an independent and objective leader who can be a bridge of ideological differences and represent the interests of all Slovakia's people. That statements about the loyalty to Fico government should be the sign that the presidency could be more about the continuity than the change, of course. But in the context of the power structure, Pellegrini can be a balancing element only if he managed to exercise presidential powers independently, critically, and in favor of democratic principle and rule of law. His prior commitments and political context, however, suggest that this role may be challenging. I don't know if Peter Pellegrini will be the next Michal Kovács between the period of the Vladimir Mečiar's government. But right now, we can see that the communication basis of Peter Pellegrini will be really challenged by the future development of the Slovak Republic.
Remaining with Pellegrini, what future awaits for his Hlas party after the departure of its founding president, Pellegrini? Can the party maintain its strong position as the second most important element in the Fico cabinet after the party leader resigns as the Speaker of the National Council and goes to the Grassalkovich palace?
Some of the analysts try to compare the Hlas Social Democratic Party of Peter Pellegrini to Rudolf Schuster political party, which also was used only to be elected Rudolf Schuster as a president, and then they were dismissed and disappeared from the Slovak party system. There are several scenarios which was a lot of the people and analysts talking about. The first scenario involves continuing the current state, where the Hlas party could continue in the policies without significant changes. Peter Žiga or Šutaj Eštok would replace Pellegrini as a head of the parliament, and there should be, let's say, the new or someone included Sakova should become a head of or the chair of the political party of Hlas. The second scenario is trying to that the party would be facing internal turbulence and potential weakening, as it has to adapt to the new political reality without Pellegrini. This departure of such a charismatic leader as Pellegrini is could cause that the party to work harder in defining its policies and goals. Replacing Pellegrini will be a key question for the party, with a new leader to be selected from the party congress. The main candidates are Richard Raši, Denisa Saková, Zuzana Dolinková, Matúš Šutaj. Each of them can bring a different experience, but also political perspective. Third scenario anticipates that is the possible breakup of the Hlas, which could cause, for example, because SNS want to gain the position of the Speaker of the Parliament, or the party Smer potentially absorb the Hlas political system, and it will be the strengthening the current position of the Smer on the Slovak political party system. In any case, the departure of the Peter Pellegrini from this position, from the position of the Speaker of the National Council, of the Chairman of the party, represent a critical point for the future of the party.
The Progressive Slovakia party that came second last September on the parliamentary election supported Ivan Korčok, but they did not have their own candidate, while the outgoing president, Ms. Čaputová, was a Progressive Slovakia candidate. And what future awaits for Zuzana Čaputová?
Firstly, Progressive Slovakia as a party, which Zuzana Čaputová was, or the current president, she is still in a position, was coming from their party, and they decided not to finding their own, but support Ivan Korčok. They believe that they can bring a common, let's say, opposition wing in Slovakia, that all political parties which are outside of the coalition will support one candidate, which for the whole time was presented as Ivan Korčok. A little bit later, Igor Matovič presented his entrance to the campaign, etc. But formally, they tried to, let's say, support the people's candidate, not just the political one. There is also the question that Zuzana Čaputová, it was the tough years in Grassalkovich Palace, especially with even the COVID period, instability, rising of the polarization. And I understand that this also political fight was not something really, let's say, good and nice for her in this position. As Zuzana Čaputová, I think, in last session on civic platform from Tatra to Schumann said that on the June 16, the day after her presidential term ends, she has no major plans other than the routine household activities like cooking. According her expressions, she expressed that she does not plan to re-enter to active politics like it was Andrej Kiska, but although she wants to take a leave, she needs some time to rest.
So she's not planning to go back to Progressive Slovakia Party and to lead the party politics?
No.
And what about her future plans, maybe in European politics, European Union politics?
For now, she say that maybe she will be associated with the public service in the field of law or public interest. Maybe she want to be, or she can see herself as involved by likely in other form of the public engagement. If she will be continue in a high level of politician, this is right now very hard to predict. But she stated that she wants to be still here and she wants to contribute it to the discussion on public affairs from the perspective of experience she gained while serving at the highest state office.
As a last question, what repercussions the presidential election might have on the campaign of the upcoming European Parliament ballot?
Of course, the presidential election in Slovakia have brought some proclamation or the consequences that may impact not only on the national but also the European level. The election of the Peter Pellegrini as a president is a symbolic to the strengthening and legitimacy of the current coalition, but also poses a challenge for him to unify a divided society. These results can be interpreted as a referendum on Slovakia's direction within the European Union and reflection to global issues, such as conflict in Ukraine. And Pellegrini victory may reflect a broader trends where voters prefer candidates who promise stability and present the social populist approach to politics. But as I mentioned, the Slovak political party is not represented by just pro-Western and pro-sovereignist campaigns. There is also the other main questions. Pellegrini's success in the presidential election can be seen as a trend which could have some implication for upcoming European Parliament election. And we can see how, for example, this candidate mobilize the voters and what topic are important. So it will be very important also during this campaign to European Parliament elections, what type of topics and terms will be, let's say, in the current discussion. So we can see the emphasis on the topic of security, stability, but also the social issues. The consequences of these presidential elections may include the strengthening of the parties associated with the newly elected president and possibly shift in a political discourse towards more moderate and conservative topic, which could affect the political dynamic not only in Slovakia, but we can talk also about the broader European context. On the other hand, we can see Pellegrini was affected to present Ivan Korčok as a fourth candidate. The European elections have the broader aspect of topics and themes which are connected not just the conflict or the war in Ukraine. But we need to also realize that a lot of the voters of Peter Pellegrini and support of the Hlas political party are pro-European voters. So in this stage, also the political campaign can be played as the same as during the presidential elections. And even this was one of the reasons when Peter Pellegrini setting up the Hlas Social Democratic Party to be the more moderate alternative for Smer. We can see the possible shift in a political discourse, but the political dynamics in Slovakia, is much more complicated, like we can see during the presidential election. I think that there will be once again open the topics which are not was opened just during this presidential election.
Jaroslav Ušiak, thank you very much for sharing your most thought-provoking and informative opinion and input about the 2024 presidential election in Slovakia. It was a pleasure talking to you once again about Slovakian party politics. Dear listeners, you have been listening to the Votes and Seats podcast series of Mathias Corvinus Collegium's Center for Political Science. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Stay tuned for our next episode. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you for the invitation.